Thank you for joining Analytics Today, a podcast series that focuses on AI, data and analytics, and latest trends in the AI world. I'm your co-host, Dr. Jeremy Roberts, and with me always is Samir Khan. What is up, Samir?
Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
It's been a while. I think we kind of took a little break for a while to, I guess, let the world flesh itself out, or I want to say flush itself out, jokingly, right? With all the crazy things that are happening. But, we're
Totally.
coming back today. We're coming back with a cool topic. And you're wondering, why is there a third random person sitting here in the room? And I'd like to introduce our third co-host for the day is Jason Zimmerman. What is up, Jason?
Yeah, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so everybody
Fantastic.
knows who Samir and I are. Before we get started, Jason, this is your time to shine, spotlight, whatever you'd like. This is your 30-second elevator pitch. Go.
30 seconds. Can I
Well,
get a
let's do
minute?
1 minute.
No,
Yeah, well, let's do
no,
one
I'm
minute.
kidding. I'm kidding. No, let me say this too. I appreciate you guys having me on. Amir and I met a couple of weeks ago. Jeremy, you and I talked a few times as well.
Mhm.
I've just become a really big fan of what you guys are doing. I mean, one, I'm a data analyst myself, or I grew up at least in the analytical space, but I think your guys' focus on the results is what drives me in. And this story will flush out as we talk, I'm sure, but I've always had this idea that, data leads to the next big question. And every time I listen in on one of your guys' podcasts and episodes, that's what you guys are trying to pull. But the banter that you guys also bring back and forth is natural, it's organic, your curiosity really
Thank you.
drives a really thorough conversation and a great story arc. So it's a real pleasure for
Appreciate
me
it.
to just, be sitting with you guys. So I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
But we would love to hear more about you, Jason. Tell me
Yeah,
more.
so
Yeah.
Your
yeah.
background.
So I am, I guess by trade, I'm an economist. I grew up really looking into and researching behavioral economics. I worked for government clients that were moving from defined benefit to defined contribution plans. And what we were trying to do is to match the investment outcomes when it was professionally managed into when it was individually managed. And so as you can imagine, those outcomes were a little bit lower. We were using behavioral economics to create the right incentives. And when you hear that, what I think is going to be really interesting in this conversation is that is a psychological problem. That's a psychological sort of understanding that we were trying to pull out.
Yep.
I did that for a few years, but then I moved over to Mercer, the big international global HR firm where I worked on mergers and acquisitions. And so that thread of psychology and economics and incentives moved into sociology. And so when I was there for about 6 years, what we were doing is we were trying to bring two firms together. And the way that I think about it is you have 1 + 1. How do you make that equal 3? And on a scale, that's sociology. But on an individual basis, that's psychology. And so even though I was bringing this behavioral economics through to these lenses and everything else, the thread was still that 2/3 of that strategy is going to fail. That's John Cotter out of Harvard. And I couldn't understand why that was happening. And I have this story that I was asking a global director at the time, how do we know that we're not part of that failure? How do we know that we're not part of that 70%? And I'm going to brush over a long conversation, but it came out to, why do we care? We've been paid. And for me, that wasn't satisfactory. I wanted to create really good theory. I wanted that theory, to work itself out in strategy. But if that strategy ultimately failed, then there was something that I needed to understand to pull it back to really get that theory and that strategy to be
I like that.
more robust, to be stronger. And so I took that and I worked for a global Fortune 500 firm for 13 years where I led strategy and transformation for that organization. It gave me the hands-on experience of all these things that I was thinking about from a theoretical lens into a strategic lens, actually doing a hands-on.
It's almost like that hilarious joke that says, a priest, a rabbi, and a whatever walk into a room. But, here you've got three different flavors of
Yeah,
transformation experts, right? You've got a behavioral science transformation, which produces which kind of is the understanding of authenticity.
yeah,
You
yeah,
have AI, you have digital transformation, and go-to-market transformation. I mean,
yeah.
this is going to be this is going to rock. This is going to be a great
Yeah.
conversation.
Well,
Yeah,
and,
it's
and to
coming, three
add to
different
it,
worlds coming together. Yeah.
Yeah.
precisely. And this is the name of my firm actually too. It's Threefold Collective. And I mean it's the multidisciplinary background that I bring too, but that collective piece, you guys are now part of that
Mhm.
collective. And this is where, not just organizations, but I think individuals coming together, right, from the sociological lens, The three of
Sure.
us are going to create something greater than the sum of our parts. And that to me is the most beautiful part. And so, yeah, I'm excited about this conversation and
Well,
dig
Well, here's
into
where
it.
we
See what
get
you guys think.
started. If we talk about the name of the podcast today, or the name of the show today, the name of the show is AI versus Authenticity, the race to business transformation. And what we're really talking about today is how AI is really transforming business. We all understand that. It's really where that question around like, but authenticity, it remains irreplaceable, right? So we're going to
Yeah.
first start with Samir asking or answering this question from his point of view. Jason will then jump over to you and then with me. But, let's talk about the why. The whole Simon Sinek, let's start with why, right? Why does this matter? Like, Samir, in your mind, why does this matter?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jeremy. In my mind, what matters is because we are getting to a phase, 3 years ago when GPT-3 was launched, it changed
Mhm.
everything. AI is not new. It's been there for decades. You and I, and pretty sure Jason has come across machine learning and all of the modeling that we do in our enterprises and all the good stuff. Well, Gen AI changed that because now it has democratized data and especially the LLM models. So with that, it has become very easy for anyone to leverage these models and start using them for their benefit. But at the same time, how do we distinguish between what's been produced from an authentic human thinking process and psychology versus what's produced from an AI? And then how
Mhm.
do we create that authenticity is critical. So from my standpoint, I think the production of the data, whether it's truly coming from an authentic human being and thought process, or it's just generating from an AI that has access to large language models, which has access to the word knowledge. So that's kind of my perspective. I don't know, Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a great thought, and I'll definitely add to it. I think there is nuance here, and we'll get into the nuance. But what is the role of authenticity, and why does it matter? To me, I think as individuals, I think we can say this as organizations as well. Is we need to evolve, right? The pace of not just technology, but the economy, everything is moving so quickly, and it's up to us to keep up with that. And one of the fundamental tenets that I know and I've understood in the past 20 years is that change is hard. And change is hard because we as individuals lose control over that change or we potentially lose clarity over that change. And so, in order to influence us or persuade us into that, there's certain psychological factors that have to be present for us to feel that we're in a safe space, that we're in a trusting environment, that the people that are encouraging us to move forward and evolve have our best interests at heart. And where I think AI really accelerates is a certain piece of Robert Cialdini's work around authenticity, around knowledge, and that's credibility. But there's these other things that I think come into that, these other six elements that AI isn't quite able to match. And part of that just boils down to the lived experience. It's having skin in the game. And that's something that an I don't think can necessarily mimic very well. And so having that human experience, that human connection, I think really drives that authenticity. And so for me, Jeremy, that authenticity is such a critical part to ignite change in us and to allow us to evolve and move forward.
So here's something I'm thinking about. If you're a listener and you're sitting there thinking, okay, this is a little bit of a different flavor for analytics today because a lot of times Samir and I are dissecting problems and coming up with a solution and how you approach things. If you're a business person listening to this, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, this is cool. I kind of work with AI, but I'm getting into it. But I also don't deal with authenticity. You're probably sitting there thinking, in the last 6 months of the last year, I have never been approached by anybody in my business that said, let's focus on authenticity. Now, let me bring this to the real world. So,
Yeah.
this is why this is important. So, listen up, people. All I did was a basic Google search and I wrote in what is authenticity in business? And authenticity in business came out with this definition. It says, in a business context, authenticity means being genuine, transparent, and true to your brand's value and mission. So, think about that. Why is authenticity important, right? It's coming back to being genuine, transparent, and true to your brand's value and mission. But then it talks about saying you're fostering trust and building relationships with your customers and your employees. Now, this is true basic to the basics of business. Where does AI come into this? Well, AI is now the accelerator. AI is the new accelerator for all business. It creates more efficiencies. So why the hell is today important? It's because it all comes down to being true to your brand and your mission. right? But it also comes down to, are you building and fostering relationships with your current customer base and your employees? So why is important? Why is it important today? That's exactly why it's important today.
That's
Yeah,
great.
Just
I
simply
like
Great.
that.
so. Yeah. So now
Love
everybody's
it.
happy because we're all listening for
Yeah,
the
I
right
think
reasons.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And thanks for connecting the dot, Jeremy, for our listeners, because it's important. I do wanted to pick a little bit of mindset from Jason in terms of you were talking a little bit about the authenticity paradox. And so going back to what Jeremy was reflecting on from a business context, what does that really mean? Like, how do you apply this in the business, and what is going to be kind of the output of that?
Yeah. So for me, the way that I use, and I'll connect some of these dots on data, because again, I started out as an economist, and data is really important to that. But for the world that I live in, right? Like I said, I work in organizational change, and so my job is to make a company move from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And, as we're talking about here, in order to do that, authenticity plays this role that if you do it, you can obviously save millions of dollars in consulting fees. You can reduce employee stress and fatigue. You can retain, your core talent. There's a lot of sort of impacts to that. And in some of the ways that I, for instance, use data in this is in order to find or identify, pinpoint those authentic individuals across an organization. We, as the sociologist hat on, we use social network analysis, or when it's applied to an organization, organizational network analysis. And the way I like to think about that is they say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so is influence, right? So is trust. And what we can do is we can scale this across, in my case, a 15,000 person organization that would allow us to identify where those influential people are. That would accelerate whatever change it may be. And to do that, you have to be authentic. And by being authentic, that's where you sort of get, all of these benefits that whatever it is, whatever your change is about, succession planning, merger, digital transformation, whatever that may be. That's sort of the end game, right? Is to do that as quickly as possible with the limited amount of friction that
But
that you
do
can.
you have to have AI in order to do this, to have
I
authenticity?
No. In fact, part of the argument that Samir and I
Yeah.
are writing about is that AI plays this role. And I think for my case, and Samir, you chime in here as well, AI, I think, is the pendulum is swinging that we
Yep.
might be using AI potentially in not the most optimized
Or you
fashion.
may be using it not knowing that you're using it already because a lot of tools already use it.
True. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
it's in the background. And so, yeah, I think the argument in our paper that Samir and I are writing is, what is the role of authenticity, and how do we
Hmm.
use AI so that we can show up to be as authentic as possible in the right places at the right time?
Yeah, no, I think it's good. As you guys were talking about thinking about it, right? How does AI fit into the authenticity, the discussion that we're having about authenticity and how it applies to the business? The way I think about that is you have a
Yeah.
spectrum, right? You're on both sides of the spectrum. Either you can be like completely authentic and just focus on your core traditional values of the organization and the definition that Jeremy provided. And then the other side, you have these modern, agile, fast-paced, transform organization that is working on its own autonomously, right? So I think in the spectrum is on one side, and maybe I'm not thinking correct, but one side you can have authenticity, at the other side you can be autonomous. So how do you
Hmm.
bridge the gap and become, I don't know what that word is, but you have the authenticity, but you also have the autonomy to help you build the businesses of the future. And that's what I
Mhm.
talk a lot about my
Hmm.
quantum delegation framework, right? So ultimately, you use AI as an amplifier and not necessarily the replacement of the human intuition, the human strategy. But at the same time, don't treat AI as your glorified to do list creator or to do list agents. Like everything now, it's agent. Oh, there's like agentic economy. We're talking about everything's going to be agentic. Yes. But at the same time, you need to start thinking about at what level of this agentic economy you live in. Are you at the very bottom level where you're only using your agents to do the to-do list for you and act them as like a supercharged intern? Or you're at the top of the list where you're still driving the strategy, you're still driving what you're really good at from an authentic business and authentic human standpoint, and letting AI do everything else that is not necessarily going to give you that strategic direction that you need
Okay.
to do. So it's not going to give you the time to do that.
So I'm sitting there thinking, you just said this phrase, giving AI the freedom to do that. So are you saying you're giving up will and choice and you're giving up freedom? And are you saying that you need to give into the AI to say, please do it for me? And then how much of the business are you giving up by doing that? Because then are you
Yeah, that's a
losing your
great.
authentic self? Are you losing your authentic self by saying, I'm just going to let it think for me? I know that's what just
Yeah,
popped into my head.
that's
Yeah.
that's a great point. And then when you again, when we start going into these gray areas as how much control you can give AI to run your business and your lives, my view on that is you're going to be controlling your strategy, your vision, and how are you going to lead the organization as an influential leader, like going back to Robert Cialdini's influence category, right? But then you're going to be giving up everything else that is just right now in noise. For example, like if you're leading a large organization, the most important thing for you is to focus on how do you develop the right culture in that organization? How do you have the right vision? And how do
So
you
authentic
infuse this
culture?
vision in the organizational culture?
Okay,
Then
so I
how do
mean,
you?
because culture is a big word, and I know Jason, you've
Mhm.
done this stuff before. It's like
Yeah.
culture is one of those words that can mean anything. Remember, Smear, you and I go into these meetings with these clients and be like, "Oh, I'd really like to do personalization." Come on, man. Personalization can mean 1,000 things. So when we say culture, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a culture of change, a culture of acceptance of AI? Are we talking about a culture of authenticity? Are we talking about a culture of allowing and giving permissions to AI to create that authenticity?
It's a mixed bag. I don't know, Jason. What are your thoughts there? You have worked a lot in management of change and change management.
Yeah.
How do you think about the culture part of it?
Yeah, and especially at my time at Mercer for 6 years, we worked a lot on trying to change culture. And I'll say this, if Jeremy, using a trick you just used, if you type into Google, like what is culture, or you type it into
Yeah,
ChatGPT, in our case, I mean, there are 6 or 7 core fundamental definitions of what culture is. And so what that pinpoints is culture is incredibly difficult to define. And I
yeah,
think based on what you're trying to do, you can define it in any different ways. The way that I like to think about it is people are the greatest assets of any firm, right? We know this, especially in a knowledge economy. And uh, the thing that allows those people, again, I think about it as a 1 + 1 = 3, to be their best self, which a lot of people will say their authentic self, is that they need to have a certain set of norms or almost rules of the game that allow them to focus on performance while knowing that there's a sense of fairness in that organization. And so the
yeah.
culture is the unwritten rules that will dictate how that plays out. There are obviously the formal rules, these are the policies and everything else that will shape it. That's kind of the first pass at it. But then, there's just when you guys walk into that room, right, and you guys are talking, is hierarchy the unwritten norm on who speaks first, right? Or is it more the subject matter expert? These are the unwritten things that everybody has to learn as they move into a new culture that will shape how your thoughts as an individual get elevated into the collective. And so yeah, culture is really difficult to define. If I can maybe step back for 1 second, because let me offer a different analogy on how I think about the intersection of AI and where it might be useful and how that can elevate the authenticity of an individual. So think about like a medical diagnosis that maybe you just got, right? There's a lot of work out there to say if there is a complex symptom, that how that doctor interprets that
Hmm.
is based largely on their experience and what they've seen. And so whether that's, identifying cancers or whether that's just something more mundane like a certain flu or, what have you, that is shaped by human bias. But if you start to put that information into an AI agent who has this depth of knowledge and can process and compute all of those symptoms and the context in a much more rapid sense, you're sort of, as the doctor, you're sort of, you're just growing in your credibility with that, right? You have all this knowledge at your exposure now. But when you get back into the room and you share what that diagnosis is with the patient, the doctor may say something to the effect of, this is how I would treat my own mother. And that something's going to happen there that's a little bit more magical. And it gives that doctor standing. It says that that doctor has a little bit of accountability in there. It says that they have this same lived experience that would put a little bit more trust in that doctor than just reading it online. And by doing that, talking about the outcomes here, is you as the patient are going to find him more authentic based on how he's having that lived experience with you.
Approaching it, yeah.
The approach, yeah. And you're more likely to be compliant with whatever solve he or she puts forward to you. And so in that sense, you're marrying the credibility, sorry, the work, the knowledge base that the AI agent may have, and mixing it in so that the doctor can show up at the right place at the right time with the right experience in order to affect change.
Yeah, and that's kind of where my spectrum analysis was. Basically, you need to come in the middle, right? Either
Yeah.
you go full autonomous or you stay full authentic, although you could go both in parallel. But I really think when it starts to get into that area, you need to start figuring out how do you balance between autonomy and while maintaining your authenticity as a leader. I don't
Yes.
know, Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
How do you maintain your identity and mold into other people, but maintain your own authenticity?
Yeah, especially in the
I mean,
education world. Like education is
it's,
transforming as well, right? And
I
and you
mean,
have worked with a lot of institutions, so I would like to get that perspective. Like how do you start educating people in that
yeah,
area?
I'm thinking about the same way is like when I walk into a business as a consultant. When I walk into a business as a consultant, the first thing you don't want to do is walk in pumped up, chest out. I'm the man. You hired me to create change. Everybody bow down. Everybody listen to me. You do that, you alienate everybody. You might as well turn around and walk out the door, right? But how do you show authenticity in saying, you hired me because I am bringing in an elevated point of view, an either elevated character of culture that they need to adapt to, or an elevated way of thinking, or a new way of thinking. Basically, I'm a change agent. I'm coming in to create change and I'm there to tear shit up. I'm going to make things happen, right? But then how do you do that but still be authentic and not alienate people? I think the difficulty comes down to the same with education and the same way as being a consultant is you have to gain trust immediately and you have to go in. So here's a new perspective. I tried a few different things as I go in and I teach students. Before I teach them, I send them a welcome letter, right? I send this huge welcome letter. And in the welcome letter, I overdo it. When I say overdo it, I put my entire resume on there. It freaks them out. They're like, wow, this guy is, what's the 2025 slang? Oh, he's flexing. You know what I mean? He's telling us everything that he is, every club that I'm in, every organization, every board I'm on, everything that I've done, I blow them away. So when they come in, they're sitting there thinking, oh my God, is this guy going to be an because he's coming in and flexing. But I come in as one of the nicest people they've met. I connect with them and they're saying, I instantly connect and I instantly have credibility. And all of a sudden we gel because I came in with this big character of change and I'm being authentic to myself as somebody who's a change agent. I'm not screwing around and I'm bringing in my expertise, but I then just connected with them one to one. And I was able to be able to sit down there with them, have a joker and have a laugh with them, but to be able to say, I'm dead serious when I say we're going to create change and you got to do it with my way, but I'm here to do it with you and we're in it together. And it's this weird dynamic that I've been able to build, but I think I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer your question. I think that's the way it is that you can't not show your cards. You can't not show who you are because if you really are going to be authentic to yourself, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look at my background. I have all this crap on the wall for a reason. I've got all these accolades and letters behind my name for a reason, and I'm not going to deny it. But when I come there, I'm going to say, listen, my job is to work with you. I'm not going to work above you.
Yeah, and
Does
that's
that
the
make sense?
authenticity,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, no, I think it
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
makes sense to me because to me that is being authentic means being full disclosure in terms of what are you doing and what's your background is, so
But who
everyone
are you
knows.
really? Who are
Yeah,
you really? Like, don't hide who
yeah,
you are, you
Yeah.
know?
right.
Well, and to add a little bit of Cialdini's work here, right? So on as a change agent, right, Jeremy, in that
Mhm.
situation, you're trying to persuade somebody to, in your case, in front of a
Accept
room,
me.
accept you and accept the ideas that you're putting forward, right? And therefore grow in their educational experiences. If you look at Cialdini's work, he identified 6 elements that need to be
Okay.
in place in order to drive that influence: reciprocity, consistency, social proof, authority, which is the easiest one to kind of point to,
Mhm.
likability, and scarcity. And in your story, we can weave back in there how you're bringing all of those elements together in order to, as you said it eloquently, to affect change.
Mhm.
And this is where anybody listening in, regardless of the business situation that you may be in, what you're trying to do as a leader, right, is you're trying to affect change. Jeremy, you said up front, maybe it's to convince your customers to pick up your new product, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe as a consultant, you're trying to establish trust, that your ideas are going to drive the organization forward, right?
Mhm.
In my case, I'm trying to drive adoption rates so that an organization can move from point A to point B as rapidly as possible. And so, yeah, it's that intersection, right? I think of how do we use AI to show up in the right place so that, and this is where I love Samir's quantum delegation, so that we can use our time as wisely as possible in order to affect that change. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
like, Jeremy, have
yeah.
you, I'm sorry, go ahead, Samir.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, Jeremy, in your case of, either writing a curriculum or writing
Mhm.
that email, have you ever played around with, like a ChatGPT or a Claude to, you know, sort of inject new ideas or anything like that?
Oh, 100% of the time,
Yeah.
no doubt, and I will not hide it.
Yeah, same.
So this is what I have actually. You're going to laugh at this, and you're going to say, "Well, I'm glad you do this." There's a lot of universities right now who are scared of AI,
Yeah.
absolutely scared of AI, and they'll have training programs as an adjunct. I adjunct at 4 schools, right? And as an adjunct, they say we need to talk about AI because all of our students are using AI to write all their papers. And I'm sitting there thinking, I get that, but there's a way
Yeah.
around it because if you have them present, they can't do that. If you have them write, then there's ways to create authentic writing without using AI, right? So there's ways around it.
Yeah.
So they're fearful if not. But one thing that they tell me is, well, try not to use AI and influence too much AI in your class. And I push back and say, I'm sorry. I actually teach my students prompts. I actually teach my students how to use AI and how to use
Yeah.
AI for research, how to use AI to make things better, how to use AI to generate ideas and to further bring correlations to what they're doing rather than using basic or like statistical correlations. Because by
Yeah.
doing that, it allows them to be smarter. So I said, I'm teaching you so you're ready for the real world. Your whole
Yeah.
real world experience is going to use AI. So I might as well teach you now.
It's the same experience that where you have previously, when we were doing our programs, graduate programs, then we were not allowed to use social media
Hmm.
in the colleges, and then you were like, well, everything is social and you're not allowed to use social media in colleges.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. The same thing for AI. And I was going to
Yeah.
lean into how do you, there are certain things that you can't fake, like human emotions, part of it, right?
Yep.
And when you get into that area, and going back to what both of you guys were trying to say is, which I completely agree with, like there are aspects of human intuition, human vision, authenticity, emotions, all of these fit into the areas where you can't fake. So going back to the example that Jeremy, you were saying,
Hmm.
hey, I could create this, I could position myself and say, hey, I created this on my own, all of this curriculum, right? But then you're missing out on that authenticity that you originally built with those students.
Yeah.
And now you are positioning yourself like you created all of this, and then anyone can guess like maybe it was an AI or not, even though you're like one of the master AI user. But then on the flip side, in fact, you're going forward and saying like, hey, as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you how do you do this using AI, although universities are mandating like you can't use it. Like, yeah, we visited a couple of universities in the last few weeks for my older kid, and I specifically asked them the question, do you use AI for your review process of selecting the
Hmm.
students? And they were like, no. And then we certainly do not want any
Yes.
student writing all of this stuff using AI. And I'm like, how are you going to prevent that? There is no way you can. What you really
Total
need is you need a
BS.
student who can articulate and communicate what they have researched
Hmm.
from AI or not AI, but you need a person that is armed with AI that's going to even be a much better graduate from your
Yeah.
university versus trying to figure out like how we need to protect them from AI because they're coming after them.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Okay, let me just clarify before Jason goes. They said that their application process did not use AI. They actually said that.
Yes, they did.
Total crap. Total crap.
They review it
It's
manually,
keyword
thousands of
based. It's
applications.
keywords. It's a keyword based AI system that looks at
Yeah.
natural language processing to look at. Oh, that's so terrible that they say that. Okay, sorry. Go.
Well, and what I like, Jeremy, too, about how you're using it in the classroom, and I have a really close friend who teaches finance at DePaul University. He has a cryptocurrency class, and
Nice.
he and I were chatting. He does the exact same thing. He encourages the use of AI
Yeah.
agents. And so I think there, is this, can we use the word culture again? But there's this culture that we should almost be a little bit afraid or weary of AI. And I think in certain situations, I think we need to be more thoughtful about it. But in your case, Jeremy, and in my friend's case, injecting AI in order to create a more holistic picture of something, for instance,
Hmm.
to find the blind spots, the biases that a lot of us may have when we're looking at something. Again, that doctor analogy that we had a few moments ago, they might miss something because they haven't been exposed to it. I don't want to speak on your behalf, Samir, but I know in the writing that I do for my Substack, I will send whatever I've written through ChatGPT and say, are there any other supporting pieces of material that might strengthen this argument? And of course, it's incumbent upon me to research that and make sure that it fits in with the narrative, to make sure that it's accurate information, and that sort of stuff. But it enhances, I think, the argument that I might be making. It could potentially see blind spots where I may be missing something. And I think by teaching that in the classroom in this way, that says, hey, like, yeah, this is a tool that can maybe make us better in certain areas, but be wary of the fact that you can't replace, at least my argument goes, you can't replace the human connection, the human authenticity. But by using it in the right way, we get back to, Samir's
Best of
quantum
both worlds.
delegation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can't it help you identify human authenticity?
Alice, I
Same.
think I know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay, so say more. Part of what makes me very good at my job, and Samir has this same, because so Samir and I have the same background. We started, and then we kind of branched off, and he went one direction, I went another direction.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I'm really good at reading people. I'm really good at
Yeah.
building buyer personas and putting myself in the shoes of that person to be able to figure out how they're going to buy, what they're going to buy, when they're going to buy it, what is their buying behavior, buying habits.
Yeah.
I can put myself in their shoes to identify an entire customer journey of where they're going to start and where they're going to end in order for me to build out my go-to-market plan, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what I do now. And so it's
Yeah.
one of those things to where AI has helped me identify not only the things that I've missed, but it helped me identify correlations. It helped me identify primary factors, secondary
Yeah.
and tertiary factors that I had no idea were involved because
Yeah.
back in the day, it was just theoretical. And so, for example, like Samir and I were ones that really back in our old Rackspace days, we're talking about attribution. Attribution
Yep.
was the big thing. And it started off with this concept of basic linear attribution. One thing predicates the next, which predicates the next. And now you have so
Yep.
many different types of attribution with curves and J and U and magical things like that. But it's so wonky these days that you have to understand that there's sometimes underlying factors that then create predictabilities towards that. What we used to
Hmm.
have to do in the past is when one of our VPs would come in and say, show me all the things that you're spending money on and show me the things that have a really low ROI. And we would say, well, print sucks, right? Print or display because
Yeah.
that's a really low click-through rate. And they would say, just cut it. We're like, no, 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 no. If you cut that, you're going to have a 2-month cliff and everything's going to die. And all of your marketing is going to die in 2 months. And for them, we could not see it because it was just there. For me, using an AI to be able to identify those factors now with data and to be able to extract that out in a way that I
Yeah.
could not explain it is what is helping me now talk to clients.
Yeah, we used to
Does that
call
make
that
Yeah.
sense?
Halo, remember?
The
The
halo
Halo
effect.
effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
like, do not cut this. I guarantee you, like 1 month later, oh, everything is fine. 2 months later,
Yeah.
40% gone,
Hmm.
50%
Yeah.
gone. And then it takes 6 months to get back, even if you do get it back. And
Yeah.
so the thing is, plugging all of that data into AI and basically saying, please help me explain to a vice president of the business who does not understand, how do I show them that this
Yeah.
is a high correlation to this, and if we don't do this, we are coming away from the true authenticity, right,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
our mission to be able to provide this to clients and so on. And then that's AI is my savior these days.
Yeah, no, there's a study coming out of Stanford, I believe, called the media equation theory. And what it
Hmm.
looks at is it's looking at how humans interact with AI. And I think there's an underlying point in this research that might be supporting this, Jeremy, is people will interact with AI as if it's a human. They'll talk to it. I mean, I think ChatGPT and all these different AI agents are really fueling that. But what they found is uh, that it doesn't become influential. It does help create an argument and strengthen an argument, but it lacks that intent. It lacks the human experience. All these things that you're saying when you're sitting down with that executive, trying to explain what all these different attribution and correlations and all these things are coming together to suggest and say, it's that lived experience in summary, right, that allows you to connect and actually affect that change in a different way. And it's yeah, I mean, I think AI is good at mimicking a lot of those things, but at least in the iterations that we have today, I don't think I don't know if it can create intent or any of these other things that Cialdini is talking about, like reciprocity, right? In the article that Samir and I wrote, we talk about an example where maybe you guys were at Rackspace and you guys stayed late and maybe you missed dinner with your family. Like you gave up something in order
Hmm.
to strengthen the bonds, the relationships that you two had. AI can't do that. That's not an experience that AI can easily mimic.
Well,
And
let's talk about
that
this.
strengthened that.
Let's talk about this because I know we had a lot of topics that we wanted to cover, but then I look at one of
Yeah.
these topics to where we talk about where AI can fall apart and this idea that, the human moments AI cannot fake, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so we talk about, you guys highlight this idea around the intangibles of leadership. AI cannot mimic body language. It can't intuition,
Yeah.
trust, emotional intelligence, and all these different things. So I guess the question is, when you're looking at AI, you have to understand there's a case study for when it should be used and a case study for when it should not be used.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think what we want to do, maybe if we want to take a few minutes, let's be clear. Let's talk about when AI should not be used. Like, what is something that you think people are currently using AI for that they really should not be doing? Like, are there
Well,
certain crises or certain situations where even you, Jason, as an expert, saying,
yeah.
yeah, there is no way in hell you can prove real human authenticity by using an AI for that. There's no way.
Yeah, I think especially you pointed out in the crisis leadership, you cannot use AI. Like, for example, if you're working for a company and then something happened that is a macroeconomic impact from that specific company, like, I don't know. Let's say if you're working for a medical company and then somehow the doctor did a surgery and then the surgery went wrong. And then now
Mhm.
here's that person who was basically the patient. He has a pretty well known following, and then they just went on social media, and there's like this big impact on that medical company. So how do you, as a leader of that medical organization, the CEO, how are you going to come forth and manage these crisis situations? I don't think AI can do that, at least not right now. And I'm not sure
Yeah.
even in future how that's going to be managed. I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah. I'll say this, the thread that I'll talk about is exactly where you're going to crisis or any emotional type of event. I don't think AI really serves its place there. On a daily basis, some of the things that I've seen are, let's just say you're a CEO or you're trying to communicate something outward, and you'll know, and this is I think too what the Stanford research media equation theory comes out to, is you will know if it's written in AI, right? You may not be able to point to the exact thing, but there's something in there that just doesn't connect. And that's the research that they kind of pointed out. And so if you're a CEO of a 20, 30, 40,000 person organization, maybe you're going to step down or maybe there's a new CEO that's coming in place. A lot of those communications will be written with AI.
Mhm.
But I think what I've encouraged a lot of those CEOs in those positions to do is when it really matters in an emotional situation like that, in a crisis, is to sit and write it yourself. Think about the experience that you're going through, the feelings that you have, and share those feelings. And I think we've all been the recipient of some sort of organizational change in that matter, or, in a medical situation. And when you receive just the almost cold hard facts of what that situation is, even though it might be correct, it might be perfectly, done, it doesn't quite give you the warmth that there's somebody else on the other side that has that shared experience with you. And at a human level, psychology and sociologists have found time and time again that what affects change is that human connection, that human experience.
Like that.
That's great. No, this is good. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
one last thing I do want to call out is how do we make sure that we as leaders help other leaders and also leaders who are listening to this podcast? How do we make sure that we are leveraging AI responsibly in everything that we do? There is no stopping, as Jeremy mentioned and Jason mentioned as well. AI is going to only grow, and we all know that. But at the same time, how do you use it more responsibly? You put the right structure in the organization. Like I'm really big on risk management
Mhm.
part of the AI. I'm really big on AI ethics. So how do you use it in the proper ethical standards? It doesn't matter if it's a university or an
Yeah.
organization or government or anywhere. We need to make sure that we become responsible AI citizens. And that's going to also bring in authenticity to make AI even more authentic at its producing value for all of our organizations. Any last minute thoughts,
Yeah.
gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, I think before you get into that, I think one thing is somebody integrates AI to create authenticity. Where do they go to determine whether they did it right or not? How can they keep themselves in check? You know what I mean? It's really easy for somebody to say, oh, yeah, we integrated this and we did it the right way and we did it for the best benefit of our customers and we followed our mission and everything. Where do they go to make sure that they didn't just completely screw up? You know what I mean?
It's
Who's
a
holding check?
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that question. I'll say this. I think it's a really hard thing to measure directly. I think you have to do
It
it
is.
almost via proxy in a
Hmm.
way. And some of the things that we do on our side is, we'll measure sentiment within an organization. And again, as I sort of mentioned at the top of the hour, if you look at like social network analysis, this is a quantitative data-driven field driven by mathematical theories. That will allow you to look at how that sentiment is rippling through the organization. And it's not a direct measure, it's a proxy for it. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to that human experience, right? And I think, as we said, beauty and influence are in the eye of the beholder. And so, really, the person who knows that is the person that you're talking to. Jeremy, you said you're a great read of people and emotions. And ultimately that's what it comes down to. Did the person respond in the way that we wanted them to? Did they move from point A to point B? And did they do that willingly? Did they do that with arms wide open? Did they feel safe and comfortable in making that move? Or 2/3 or 70% of people going through organizational change, did they resist it? Did they block
Mm-hmm.
it? And so it's yeah, you could proxy it, but I mean, I think at the end of the day, as humans, right, I think we know that intuitively, on whether we've succeeded or not.
We're assuming people are just normal humans and they should understand basic moral concepts that things were done correctly in the right way.
Yeah. That's another show to get into, but maybe that's next time on Analytics Today.
That's a good one. Yeah. At the end of the day, I do think that generally, when you look at the large spectrum of people, people have good intentions. But
Yeah,
at the same time, how we leverage technology, tools, data responsibly is kind of where I keep going back to. Because it has a lot of power. I mean, we already
yeah,
seen the macroeconomic impact of using technology could gravitate people in one specific direction. And it's very difficult. And I'll say this
yeah,
openly, it's very difficult, especially for our younger generation, our kids, to understand what is right or wrong when they're watching YouTube. And they could come across any video that will present all the authentic information that they need. It'll feel real, it'll feel connected. How do we
yeah,
develop the generation of the future that has the ability to distinguish between, irrespective of whether it's AI or human, but if it's authentic, real, true, or not?
Oh my God,
yeah,
that's like a slippery slope. It's when you tell somebody, "Yeah, didn't you hear about this?" Well, I didn't see it on where I get my news. Okay,
yeah,
okay,
Right.
cool. Well, calm
yeah,
down a little bit. It's like, wow, your news sources are
We're
really
building these
bad.
silos. We're building
yeah,
these
Yes, it's like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
these walls, which they're in reality. But one the beauty of one more thing I would say is what I like about AI is it doesn't, you can't keep it in silos. It goes
no,
across.
yeah,
So
yeah,
to me,
it's the great
ultimately,
connector.
Yeah, it is a
It
great
is.
connector. So it will help you in some shape or form if you use it in the right way, provide clarity and
Yeah.
provide the problem behind the facade. So I think what's the real problem here? Let's talk about that. Don't put that
Yeah.
facade in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I go for it.
I was gonna say, yeah, one thing that like the question that sparked this, right, is where are we using it incorrectly? But you can answer that too, I think, in a way of like how are we using it well? And one of the places that I've really seen is in note taking, as an example. And what I
Hmm.
love about like if you just take Granola or any of these, AI agents that will sort of sit in on your call. I mean, I've seen some of these take just absolutely fantastic notes that really summarize this,
Yeah,
just a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, articulate way that I mean, one, I don't know if a human can do it that well. But what it does is it frees that person that you've invited in as a note taker to be present in the meeting. Even if you're running the
it's
meeting,
weird. It's weird.
you
Yeah.
Right.
know this, yeah, the AI agent has your back and they're gonna take these notes for you and follow up in the right way to say, great, on the next Analytics Day podcast, we're gonna talk
People
about
put so
politics.
much trust in the AI. Like I will go
Yeah,
into a meeting and turn on my note taker and I will take
yeah,
zero notes, zero. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I put all of my trust that this extremely important meeting for 2 hours
yeah,
is going to be taken care of by this note taker. Holy crap. I think you just put into perspective of the fact that people put so much trust
yeah,
into an AI to just listen and tell me what I'm supposed to know.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Can you tell me the
yeah,
important things that we talked about? And can you tell me what my next steps, my action items are?
yeah,
And I didn't write down a single thing because I put that much
yeah,
trust into the AI. That's
yeah,
Yeah.
creepy. I forgot
yeah,
about
That,
that.
that
right,
is that is definitely
right.
it's a fantastic example.
So,
Well, I
Well,
think we're
great.
actually
I think
running
this
out of
has
time,
been
right? Or
Well, this
yeah,
has been fantastic. I think this is great. So, Jeremy, what are your any last comments, Jason,
no,
before Jeremy helps us close this out?
yeah, Jason, go for
you
it.
know, yeah, I was going to say it's I love the forum. And like I said, I've been a listener of your guys' podcast for quite some time and I love the banter and just appreciate just being part of it today, but it's as I mentioned, data always leads to the next big question. And that's what I think has been so fun about this episode, at least on my side, is being able to explore sort of how we can use data and AI and any type of mathematics in order to help us as humans show up in a more authentic and appreciative way. And so, yeah, Samir and I are going to publish this article tomorrow, this weekend on Substack, and invite
Awesome.
you,
Substack.
all to read that and check it out and comment and obviously add your own thoughts to it. And help us see maybe where we haven't, maybe our own blind spots.
Yeah, and to that point, everyone can go to solvewithai.substack.com. And Jason, what's your Substack?
It's called Threefold Outcomes. Yeah,
threefoldoutcome.substack.com. Okay, very
yeah.
good. So you can check it out over there, the article, and we're also going to publish the recording of this podcast. By the way, we didn't mention this, but was on live on LinkedIn. And we're trying to
Hey,
go live as much as possible. So next time we're also going to be live on YouTube. So we will let everyone know beforehand, but this was a test. So we just wanted to have this surprised little live podcast. But yeah, I mean,
so
we're
cool.
looking forward to the next one. Jeremy?
I think this has been fantastic. I think we have to do another one of these, Jason. I think this trifecta of the three different approaches works. So I think we're going to have to do this again. So sucks
I
for you.
love it.
You're welcome. You're welcome back already. Right?
Anytime. I will happily join the discussion.
You get to hang around with the nerdery.
I love
So
it. Hey, I am a nerd.
thank you.
So,
So Samir and I are happy about this. We're excited. We have been taking a few breaks here and there from Analytics Today to just come up with new ideas and new approaches for our content and for our listeners. But I am proud to say, Samir, I don't know if you know this, but I was looking back to the date of our first episode. And without looking, Samir, I'm going to ask you for a quick guess.
Mm-hmm.
When did we start this podcast? It's like a Jeopardy music.
2016.
Are you thinking 2016? Are you sure?
I'm just guessing.
No, dude. We started this in September of 2015.
Oh, okay. I missed by
So
one
we've
year.
been doing
Okay.
this now for 9 years and 7 months. So this is how
Nice.
long this podcast has been. So congratulations. We're almost to the 10-year mark. And wow, yes, we don't have 1,000 episodes like a lot of people because we focus on quality and not quantity. So thank you, wink, wink. But outside of that, I want to thank you everybody for joining us today. Remember, come on, check us out, reach out to us. I know a lot of people have been reaching out to us lately about coming on as guests. Samir and I are trying to work through that as best we can. But outside of that, Jason, again, thank you. Samir, always great to see you, and we'll see you guys soon.
Fantastic. Love this, guys. See you. Bye bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.